The 23rd episode of Adventure Time's 7th season is the perfect piece to episode 2 of Fionna and Cake. More specifically, the scene where Finn takes Simon on an adventure to try and help ease his worries. Simon is sad since he feels as though his life is falling apart. His partner is missing and everyone around him wishes he could write more stories about Fionna and Cake. As for Simon, all Simon wants to do is find peace and live his life. Towards the second act of the episode, Finn happens to come across Simon in a bar drinking his problems away. Man clearly has problems, but that's a story for another time. Eventually the two go on an adventure. They end up in a forest blindfolded. At first I thought this was just Finn being Finn. Then I realized something. 3 words to be exact. Hall of Egress. This episode titled Hall of Egress follows Finn in a cave trying to get out. This on its own was never that difficult except for one teensy tiny problem. Every time Finn opens his eyes, he's put right at the beginning again, right at the very start. This eventually makes him frustrated and annoyed since he's the only one who has to deal with this burden. When he tries to explain to Jake and 𝗏𝗚, they don't really get it. Even when Finn tries to take Jake to see the cave, it isn't there anymore, making Finn look loony. I think that's the whole point of this scene in Fionna and Cake. Simon, just like Finn, has to deal with this alone. At the beginning of the Hall of Egress episode, Jake reminds Finn that the last time they were in this area, it's when he messed things up with Flame Princess. The parallels here are rather obvious. Simon messed things up with Betty, even though it wasn't entirely his fault. The entire ordeal did become a mess. So consider this forest Simon's very own Hall of Egress. And just like Jake during that episode, he means well for Finn, but he can't do much. The same way with how in this episode, Finn hangs out with Simon, tries to keep him entertained, but it doesn't really do anything. In the actual Hall of Egress episode, Finn ends up making it out of the cave only when he conquers his own internal turmoil. Well, that's how I would like to look at it. The episode has many different interpretations, but at its core, the gist of the message is pretty much the same. I inferred that this is indeed a parallel since earlier in the episode when Simon pulls out a photo of Betty, you can see the morbid look on his face. You can tell he's in distress. The same thing with Finn. At the start of Hall of Egress, Finn was maintaining his boyish innocence and happy-go-lucky attitude. I feel like the cave only attracts people with unresolved conflict. That's why at the start of the episode, the cave shut Jake out, and there was no way for him to get in. So it's quite a nice scene, and the meaning is different when you realize that Finn went through something similar a couple of years ago. While in the forest, Simon is faced with a few trials and tribulations of his own. For one, he has to deal with the monster in the water. Then he ends up coming across this wild bear. It's no coincidence that when they exit the forest, Finn is wearing a blindfold, a clear reference to this episode. Simon also manages to leave the forest with Finn since now his dampened spirits are slightly brighter. He comes to terms with who he used to be, or well, at least he's trying to. Instead of complaining and feeling sorry for himself, he opts to make strides in the right direction, quite literally and figuratively. If you're going with the logic that the Hall of Egress episode is one about burying the past and moving forward, then this aligns with everything I'm saying. You can't mope around and whine as the days just pass you by.